is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Yeah. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Yes. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I'm crying, I feel like I'm dying. I'm doing my best.
Welcome back to Being Human and Other Shit. Today we are on the ancestral homeland of the Nisenan people. We acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And today we have Maui, a very special guest on today. He's actually one of my coworkers and friend, and he has just amazing stories. And I love anytime you talk about your family and just the journey to where you are now, and you're the successful regional director for medical. Is that your title? Is that your title?
That's the title. Yeah, medical regional
Director?
director. It's okay. However you want to put it.
You're being
Medical
modest
regional director.
before.
Yes.
So thank you so much for spending time with us today. I love any chance I get to chat with you, and I know Stacy's gonna love your stories too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we just really wanted to kick it off. If you could just kind of talk through your background, your upbringing, just lay it out there.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. A little bit about myself. So my heritage and my background is Palestinian Jordanian. My family come from a Bedouin family that ruled, like, basically were around the Middle East for about 1400 years, called the Hawata tribe. They were mainly in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Palestine. So it's actually funny. Just recently, in preparation for this, one of my uncles, who's a professor, found a study that was done in Oxford in the 1800s, and it was about the Arab settlements in Sudan, and the first Arabs to settle in Sudan. And they were the first ones to go there were in the late 700s, early 800s AD. And
Damn.
one of them was I'm a direct descendant of, basically.
Whoa.
Famous boy.
We have
Your uncle actually looked this up for this podcast, or just like to prepare?
Just he always does our family history. Like, every member of the family has a family tree that goes back about 300 years.
Yeah.
But we always try to research more and see how much deeper it gets.
That's
So
sick.
it's very cool. We have a really long, extensive family. The family in general has about 5,000 or 6,000 members in it worldwide, and it's so close knit that if I were to meet somebody with my same last name, within 5 or 6 people, we could figure out how we were related to each other.
Dude, you sound, first of all, like me in my hometown. And also, I think my mom did the family tree one time on my white side, but it was because she got duped by some Jehovah's Witnesses. You know how they'll do that shit? They'll like come to the door and be like, let us give you your family lineage.
We'll break it down to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I had to wear like skirts and I couldn't cut my hair and shit. And I was like, no, this ain't it. This ain't it.
That's awesome. Well, so in the way the actual branch of the last name Arakat came about, which is my last name, it's Arakat. We had it would be my great grandfather. His name was Muhammad Jabir. He was a part of the Haita tribe. And back then, if you got an altercation and killed somebody, the family, you either paid them off or they would kill somebody from your family. And that's kind of like just how things went in the 1700s. So he got an altercation with somebody. It ended with that other person dying. And he paid off the family, but they still wanted blood. So, and this was in Jordan at the time. So he fled to Jerusalem. And I think it was like 1780. Gets in Jerusalem, settles there in a city that borders, it's like right on the border of Jerusalem, called Abadis. And it's above Jerusalem because Jerusalem's kind of in a valley. It's in the hills above it. And so it overlooks the entire city. So he settled there and started the family, started basically running the show out there. His house is still standing, and he is our patriarch, basically. So everyone is a direct descendant of Muhammad Jabir. And he had 5 sons, and they are the 5 like great grandfathers of the family. So everybody can trace back to one of the grandfathers, and it kind of defines who you are. So it's funny to say it that way. So I'm from the second son. His name was Mahmoud, and Mahmoud's class of people were known as like the warriors. They were always fighting. They were anti-establishment, anti-politics.
Fuck yeah!
Oh, dude, everybody, and everybody at some point on the way down spent some time in jail for their rebellious nature.
That sounds like my family.
It was including my grandfather, all of his brothers, my dad, two of my dad's brothers. The only one who didn't get into it was my dad, just because he ended up going into the army, which was against my grandfather's wishes. He didn't want him to be part of it. So, but I digress. He had a son who was named Ali, who's my great grandfather. Ali, and I mentioned this to Melissa last time, he had 5 wives over the span of 60 years. He married 5 times. He had 40 children. And he married his last wife when he was 74 and she was 26.
Oh, that child support.
Yeah, I know. And they had 5 children. One of them was my grandfather. He was the oldest, so he was born when his dad was 77. And the youngest, who's still alive, he's 93 years old.
Holy
his
shit.
dad was 86 when he was born, and so it's kind of crazy because he had kids super late, and they're my age, and so there's a bunch of 40-year-olds whose grandfather was born in 1850.
It's so wild.
Which is just mind blowing to think about, right? Their dad was born in 1930, and they were born in 81, 82. So it's just kind of nuts. But so the other side of the family, the two main grandfathers were Mahmoud and a guy named Ahmed. And Ahmed's family, side of the family, is all the political family. So we have a ton of family in politics. One of my uncles was the Palestinian ambassador to America for the longest time. Another one was the chief Palestinian negotiator in the PLO. He was second in command under Yasser Arafat. My dad's great uncle was the first prime minister of Jordan, and he was the prime minister for like 30 years and was one of the closest advisors to the king. We have another uncle who right now he's called the title is Ain al-Malik, which means the eye of the king. So he's the king's top advisor, and that's his current role right now. So we have tons of family politics, and at the same time, we still have the family that's anti-establishment, and it's hilarious because we all get along, but they would absolutely like kill each other in a political argument.
Well, okay, so where do you lie?
I'm somewhere in between. So I am, and it's funny to say this on air, basically, very against the.
This is not live. Don't worry.
No, I know, but you know what I mean. Like the government in Jordan can't stand. I can't stand the royal government. Even though we have again members of the family that participate in it, I don't think the king's good. His dad was better, but his dad was a politician who knew how to play both sides of the fence. In Palestine, leadership is trash, and they just kowtow to whatever anybody wants because otherwise their funding will get cut off. So they're very corruptible, and that's the story throughout the Middle East. Everybody they call it democracies. There's no democracy. Everything is corruptible, and if enough money is being paid, people will do whatever whoever is paying wants.
Yeah.
So I'm against that. But I would like a legitimate democracy out there because it needs it. People there yearn for it. There you'll see a lot of people that are so on side of the king of Jordan that God forbid you ever say a bad word about him in front of anybody, they'll go nuts. Yeah. At the same time, if you do say something bad about him in the country, you can get arrested. And it's like, this is the guy Jordan is the ally of the West. They're the country that's neutral. They're the safe haven. There are 4 military bases in Jordan, or U.S. military bases in Jordan, and yet if you say anything about the king, you can go to jail. Like how does that? How can you can't have a place where you can't criticize the leadership?
Yeah.
And so that's what I don't like. I can't stand it, and that's prevalent in every country in the Middle East, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
So that hurts me. I would love to see more structure behind that. And at the same time, like my dad, having had him, he was in the military. He also was, he served in the palace. So he guarded the king for a while. And his dad hated the king. And the king had arrested his dad on multiple occasions. But they didn't know. So this is kind of wild, one of the tangents that I'll go on today. But when my dad applied to go into the army, he did it voluntarily, and his dad's name was Ahmed, and Ahmed Erekat is a very common name. so I got a lot of cousins named Ahmed. Yeah. So they thought my dad's dad was somebody else, not my grandfather. Otherwise, they would have never let him in.
Yeah.
Who his dad was. Because throughout the 50s, my grandfather was accused of being a communist, even though he wasn't communist. He just had some communist ideals. and was extremely. He was one of the first professors in the University of East Jerusalem. Like when the university was established, he was one of the first professors there. So he taught history and he taught English. And for a guy who never lived a day outside of Palestine, spoke perfect English with a British accent. It's amazing. He was such an amazing man. And he had a library in his house that had every first edition book you could imagine, from like he had Karl Marx's like original works.
He's
and
like fucking Bella from Beauty and the Beast.
Basically.
That's my shit though. Honestly, I always am like, if I ever get rich, I'm full on having like a smoking lounge / library.
And that's how he was. He would have his smoking jacket, his pajama bottoms, sit there with his pipe. I'm not even lying. And
that's my type.
His glass of whiskey, and he would sit there and just read. And he would used to, when I was a kid, because he passed away when I was 16, he would tell me stories about his life and what happened to him and how he grew up. And in the 50s, he ended up getting elected mayor of Jericho, which is the oldest city in the world.
Yeah.
Night he got elected, he was arrested.
What the?
For being a communist, because some people were calling him a communist. Mm-hmm. And the king arrested him and they threw him in jail for 5 years. And at the time, my dad was like 6 years old when it happened. And my dad told me that he would go visit his dad in jail and like bring him books to read or bring him food and stuff. And he goes, hey, my dad would tell me, he's like, the only time he ever cried in his life was seeing his dad behind bars. Because his dad would be all beaten up because they tortured him while he was in there. And like, and my grandfather would never talk about what happened to him in there, but he talked about that time like it was, like it was no big deal, like it just rolled off his back. Yeah. And his brother, who just passed away last year, at the age of 94, he was arrested. He was an actual communist, and he was part. That's why my grandfather got arrested by association. He was part of the Communist Party in Palestine, and was getting funding from the Russians to help host, and get people to join. So he got thrown in jail for 13 years, and when he was in jail, they beat him so badly that he went blind. And so the last thing he ever saw was somebody hitting him. So until he died, when you sat next to him, he would flinch from from PTSD, basically. But again, one of the nicest, most jovial people you've ever met. Never let it affect him.
Yeah.
But those were their experiences. So when my dad joined the army, bringing it back, my dad joined the army, you at your initiation ceremony, you shake hands with the king and you take a picture. Mm-hmm. So my dad and my grandfather's in attendance, and my dad's like, I can't shake the king's hand in front of my dad because he'd kill me. But if I don't shake the king's hand, they might kill me. Like, who do I piss off, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So and when he got up to the line, he saluted the king instead of shaking his hand. And his is the only picture that doesn't exist. They never took the picture of him because he refused. The king had put his hand out, and my dad saluted him instead.
Oh my gosh!
And nothing happened. It was just like
nothing happened to him because he wasn't disrespectful. He still saluted him, but he wouldn't shake his hand. That's crazy. It was ballsy, and he was like, and my dad, and the reason why, my dad's like my ultimate hero, and I respect him like nobody else, is because of how much I saw him respect and love and adore his dad, and how much respect. Like my again, another tangent. When my dad he had a massive heart attack a couple years ago.
Yeah,
he had open heart surgery, and he said while he was on the table, he saw his dad telling him like, come, I miss you.
No.
And so that's the person he thinks about in those times. I'm like, that's how much love they had for each other and how much love I had for my grandfather and my dad.
Yeah, so, of course. That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like you come from a long line of amazing men.
It's I always say, I'm like, we're not men. Like we're not adults. Like the things that they went through and they saw, we're not adults. Like I laugh about it. My dad fought in a war when he was 20 years old. It was the 6-Day War in 1967. He was captured. He was a POW. He was tortured for over a month before he was released. Like he was 20. I'm like, I remember what I was doing at 20. It wasn't that. You know,
similar, but by choice. You know what I mean?
Exactly right. He had fought in 3 wars by the time he was 26 years old.
Oh my God.
And then decided at 28 to move to America and just start life. Like basically start a life from square one. And that's why I'm like, we're not like, we could never live up to what they did, but they did that for us. And that's the beautiful thing about it.
Okay, so what about your mom?
So my mom, here's the crazy part. So my mom also was born in Jerusalem, comes from a very well-renowned family out there. In 1967, when it was the war between Israel and Palestine and Jordan and everything, she was a refugee, and she was 13 years old at the time. And her and her family walked for 3 days until they got to a refugee camp. It was the last time she ever saw her childhood home. And like the home she grew up in, the home her dad had built by hand, gone. So she walked for 3 days, got to a refugee camp in Jenin. Then they stayed there for a couple of months and then took a car to Jordan, where they stayed the rest of the time. The small world part is, my mom's older brother was in the army with my dad. Him and my dad were really good friends, but my dad didn't know who my mom was. He didn't even know his buddy had a sister until my dad had been living in America for like 5 years, went back to Jordan to visit his family. And my grandfather was like, I want to introduce you to my friend's daughter.
That's so
who
weird.
was my grandpa. And he saw her and he was like, wait a second. It's your brother. His name is Faras. He's like, your brother named Faras? She goes, yeah. He goes, that was my dude in the army.
Dude, isn't that the weird shit how that happens where like people will take these random pictures of different places and like their significant others, like a kid in the background or some weird shit?
20 years before they've met or something like that. It's crazy. It's fate. So
it is fate. That's a perfect way to say it is fate.
It is. It's just a beautiful, beautiful story. So like my mom was a very tall for the time. She was like 5'9". And so she was a volleyball player in Jordan, and she qualified for the Olympic team. It would have been 1972. My grandfather wouldn't let her go by herself to Munich, Germany, where a bunch of Palestinian terrorists captured the Israeli team and held them hostage. Would have gone very bad for her. So my grandfather was like, see, I kept you back for a reason.
Listen, I told you. Yeah. He had an I told you so moment for sure.
Exactly. So she stayed back. She got a teaching degree, and then she got a master's in Jordan in early childhood development. And she worked her way up. She was the king's daughter's private teacher.
Oh my God.
So the princesses of Jordan, she taught them, who are now married with kids now. But she has tons of pictures inside the palace and with the king and with the daughters and all that. Met my dad. They got married. She came to America. We were born. She raised us for a bit and then went back to school. She went to UOP and got her master's again in early childhood development.
You just come from a long line of like bad motherfuckers.
No, they don't play.
A rich history.
Dude, like
nobody plays. Like nobody came here to fuck around.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, honestly, you didn't have the privilege of coming here and fucking around, right? Yeah. Like that's the thing about Americans, like we have the privilege of like fucking around where your parents are like not happening.
Our first generation peeps, we had all the time in the world to fuck around because our parents allowed us to.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like my dad's favorite story is that he arrived in America. It took him 3 days on 5 different planes to get here. When he got here, the next morning he was working. He had a job at my uncle's grocery store. And he goes, I got there, I slept for 6 hours, and I got up and I went to work at the grocery store. Didn't speak a word of English. He was just restocking the shelves.
You know what? To keep it real with you, the one thing I already like about you is you're not owning your parents' story as your story. That's like a common script I hear where people will say, well, like, you don't understand what I went through. My parents came from blank and they, they like, travel. And I'm like, 100%, but you didn't.
No, I didn't. I grew up.
You didn't.
I had the most privileged life. I can't say.
I love that you like own it, and you're like, not taking away from anything you've experienced.
No,
we will get into that, but like you're like, this is my parents' story.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like I want everyone to know that they did that for me.
Yep.
And I'm not taking it for granted. And my kids are going to have a better life than even I had.
Yep.
And I want them to know where their grandparents came from.
As they should.
As they should. And the reason why I know so much history of my family is because we talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Every story we talk, like my mom will be like, your great grandfather in the 1800s, he was part of this traveling circus and he used to ride horses and he could pick a coin off the ground with his teeth while riding a horse at full speed. Like I know that story about a great grandfather of mine.
He's a badass, by the way.
He's badass. That's cool as shit. Like,
but you guys are keeping your family alive, you know,
yes,
for generations and generations.
yes,
That's something that I really love and appreciate about you, and that you make it a point that you're telling all of these stories to your children, and you're
yes.
telling, I mean, you share them with us. Like, this is amazing. This is actually the first I've really even heard about your mom, so this is amazing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had to ask about your
My
mom
mom,
because I was like, I want to
my
hear about
mom's
your
a
mom. I
badass.
know she's a bad bitch.
She's a badass. Again, she worked for Head Start. So she joined Head Start in the early 90s, where, you know, because she wanted to help underprivileged kids, especially kids that had she mainly dealt with kids who had ADHD. Because at the time it was a relatively new diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so she worked for Head Start for 22 years until they ran out of funding. And at the end of it, she was a supervisor. She ran like 6 schools around Stockton, and she would do home visits to teach parents how to like take care of kids with special needs.
My gosh, I love your
And
mom.
then she finally retired. And so she's still like, dude,
Ask her if she wants a job.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Ask her if she wants a job. We have positions open.
Oh, I'm sure, because
Does she want to move to Sacramento?
she would love it. I've been trying to get them to move up here forever. Now I'm moving, so
I'm like, you're bouncing. Don't make them move.
move. But yeah, no. So she's such a badass. She's a gangster. She, again, for a woman in the Middle East in the 70s, she used to just like, hey, to tell her parents, I'm going to Cairo for the weekend. She's like, because she was obsessed with Tom Jones. Because she was in love with him. She had a poster of him in her room, and
I'm
she
dead.
flew to Cairo to go see. He performed in Cairo, and she went to his concert. And she said it was one of the greatest moments of her life. It was just going to see Tom Jones live.
That's so adorable.
I love this background too, because I do feel like there's this like perception that all these that women are just so subservient and like have no interest of their own, but like, you know what I mean? So I love
the thing is that it's a small group of people who do that, who shouldn't, and there's a group of women that are forced into it, and some that allow it because it's all they know.
Yeah.
And that it's horrendous, because growing up, I have 2 sisters. I have no brothers. I have an older. I'm a middle child. My father was like, your sisters are more important than you, and like straight up, like he never shied away from the fact that they were his favorites. And to this day, he doesn't. I mean, he doesn't care. He'll tell me straight to my face. But we shared in all of our chores, and I would always say, I'm like, I don't want to do this. Make them do the dishes. And his response to me was, how are you going to get married? How are you going to get married if you can't do the dishes? How are you going to get married if you can't cook? If you can't make your bed? If you can't clean your room? He's like, what wife would take you if you can't do basic chores? Like, that was always his mindset. And so I know, which is unusual for
your dad needs to teach a class. Yeah.
And he was, when we were born, my dad, again, unheard of at the time, changed our diapers, took care of us. My mom would go out, like when my grandmother passed away, she died of cancer in '86, and my mom was pregnant with my little sister at the time, and flew to Greece because my grandmother was being treated out there. My dad took care of me and my sister for 3 months while he was working full time, and made sure that we were good. Like, he bathed us. Like, we were young. I was 3. My older sister was 6, and he was, he was our mom and dad for 3 months while my mom was with her mom.
Because it was important to your mom. That's so beautiful.
And that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Yep.
My grandfathers on both sides both had plenty of. They both had daughters. My mom has 2 sisters. My dad has 4 sisters, and they come from a big family. My dad is one of 9. My mom is one of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so on both sides, both grandfathers were like, no, none of my daughters are allowed to get married until they have a college degree, they have their own job, and they have their own money.
Yep.
I love
This
that.
was in the 50s and 60s. That wasn't even happening in America.
Yeah, I mean, there was shit in America. Like, in America, a lot of that wasn't even allowed to happen.
No, it wasn't. They weren't allowed to have their own bank accounts in America at the time.
Oh, you couldn't apply for a home till like what, the 80s?
Exactly.
Woman, I actually just saw all these statistics like probably like 2 weeks ago, and there's like a situation of my family with my grandma that I was like, why would she make that decision? Because my grandma was like, let's say, go get educated, do all these things, and then there's some decisions she made that I was like, And then I actually looked some facts up, and I'm like, oh no, she wasn't allowed to do these things as a woman in America. Like, what? Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people, and I know one of the questions you asked about were religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So I am Muslim, and I was born and raised Muslim. But my dad, who is also like, he has the entire Quran memorized. but my dad can also quote verses of the Bible, and he can quote verses from the Torah because he knows all three religions inside and out. Because my grandfather also had all three books completely memorized and could quote from each one. So they wanted us, my dad especially, my mom is extremely religious, but my dad especially was just like, this is our religion, but you have options.
I love
But
that.
you should have some type of spirituality. You should have faith. Because faith gives you, the drive and it gives you motivation, it gives you comfort. Like you need to have all that with you. So I stuck with Islam and I've always been a practicing Muslim. And in regards to that, people don't understand that the view of Islam, especially over the past 25 years, has been made so backwards and so many misinterpretations that the true Islam has been so like perverted that even if you tried to explain it, people will be like, no, that's not true. Like look at Afghanistan or Pakistan or the Taliban or Al Qaeda or ISIS or whatever you want, and it's like none of these people are following actual Islam.
Yeah.
Because in Islam, when you get married, and this is kind of unheard of, you sign a prenup with your wife, and you guarantee that you're going to pay her in case anything happens. And either of you can get divorced at any time by just saying, I want to divorce you. Like there's nothing bound, you're not bound to the marriage.
Yeah.
And no woman ever has to take her husband's last name.
Yeah.
My wife does not have my last name. My sisters don't have their husband's last name. My mom doesn't have my dad's last name because it's not necessary. Why? Because you need to care for the woman, she's allowed to carry on her family's traditions too.
Yeah.
That's so
beautiful.
beautiful.
You don't have to become your husband. And people don't realize that about Islam. And that's what's sad. Like it really breaks my heart when I hear misinterpretations.
Yeah.
And it's only like I'm one person. I can only do so much, but whatever I can do to educate, I try to.
Yeah.
Because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much misinterpretation. And even within Muslims, they misinterpret their own religion.
Yep.
Like that's the part that gets me.
I mean, I feel like that even with Christianity and Catholicism, like people just interpret it in the strangest ways sometimes.
Well, it was actually funny too, like two things. Well, one, when I went to New Orleans, I try to do a lot of like those free walking tours that most international countries offer, but like in bigger metropolitan cities in America, they'll offer them. And I wanted to do the Haitian tour because I was like, I really want to learn about like Haitian culture. And I loved that this tour guide, he was like, Hollywood has basically like, taken a shit in the water of what is our religion. Yeah. They are the ones that have like demonized hate, like voodoo is an actual religion.
It is.
And and it's the religion of a lot of Haitians, and a lot of people have like, Hollywood is like made it this thing that doesn't actually exist. So, like,
it's all about raising the dead and
like, we're not sacrificing like humans and little voodoo dolls. Like that shit's not happening. That's all made up for Hollywood. And then another thing I want to say is like my co-teacher, her and I were having this conversation today. It's really funny. We had like a quick little moment where she has her best friend from high school is transgender, and they've stayed close. They're still best friends. And she was so excited to tell me about this like LGBTQ camp that they went to. And she's like, I think you'd really like it. I asked them if they'd give you the information, all this stuff. And she's like, I had to like, she's a devout Christian. Her and her husband are very religious. They go to, or very Christian. They go to church, multiple times a week. They lead youth camps. They do all these things. But she's such a beautiful example of her religion. And she was telling me like, I had to check this younger girl in our Bible study because she basically was saying like, and when she says check, I'm laughing because she's like the kindest human being ever. So like, I imagine you're checking. He's like, babe, sweetheart, like let me, excuse me, honey, but I'm like, good for you for speaking up, and not being afraid of speaking up, because she had to tell her, this person was like anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion, and she was like, listen, like if you really know the Bible from a Christianity point of view, like, she's asked her, do you lie? And the girl was like, well, I mean, I've lied. And she's like, you're no different than anybody else. Like, why do you think you're above this person?
Exactly.
And she's like telling me this, and I'm like fucking tears in my eyes. So I'm like, Kayla, like, if I could not already be more obsessed with you, like, it's just a beautiful thing, because it's the same as what you're saying. People just, they take parts of things and they make it what they want. And that is the perception, especially post 9/11. that is the perception, right?
Well, so many stories came out. It was all about, oh, these people were celebrating in the streets. And 9/11 turned out it was old restock photos and old restock videos. None of it actually happened.
Yeah.
Everybody from the Middle East called us and were terrified for us. They were scared for us and were calling. I remember our phone never stopped ringing for like 5 days afterwards. And it was, be careful, don't go outside. You don't know what the retaliation is going to look like. They were afraid they weren't afraid for themselves. They were afraid for us.
Yeah.
And so, and that's the thing. It's like all these stories get misinterpreted. The whole, oh, these suicide bombers and 72 versions. There's no such thing about 72 versions. That does not exist. It was a made up story that got, thrown out of proportion. And then obviously it's become fact now.
Yeah.
Jihad does not mean holy war. Everybody loves to throw that term around. It just means struggle. You can have a jihad with yourself. It's how you overcome any type of struggle that you have in your life. You have a jihad. And so that became a whole thing. What else was there? The whole interpretation of course, the whole women are subservient, instead of they have equal rights, they were given equal rights 1,500 years ago. We abolished slavery in 600 AD, about 1,200 years before everybody else in the world did. There's so many things that just, again, like you were saying, get misinterpreted. If you call somebody a sinner and you're not God, you automatically become a sinner because you're not allowed to judge somebody because you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's internal. You don't know what their heart says. You don't know anything about them. They don't know anything about you. So for you to judge somebody, that means you are taking the spot of the creator to judge someone, and that makes you a sinner. And that's in the Quran. That is an actual passage that you're not allowed to judge somebody else and call somebody a sinner.
Let me ask you.
Nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about how, oh yeah, these suicide bombers, and they're doing it for their religion, when nobody really looks at why. Why would somebody, and this is a real poignant conversation, why would somebody kill themselves over their situation? Was it that their situation was so bad that they had to kill themselves to get out of it?
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. Like when they had a lot of suicide bombers in Palestine, part of it was that Saddam Hussein, who by any means was not, even with the West demonizing him, he wasn't a good guy. We don't think so either in the Middle East.
Yeah.
He was paying families in Palestine $10,000 if they had a martyr. So kids were killing themselves to give their families money.
That's so sad.
Because the situation was so dire with the blockades and they basically restricted all travel. So you couldn't work, you couldn't go to school, couldn't have a job, you couldn't get food, you couldn't get water, you had no electricity. There's nothing. You're basically living in a day-to-day waiting to starve to death. What are you going to do? I'd kill myself, get the $10,000 for my family, and maybe they can get a better situation. And that's why people were dying.
Yeah.
But again, none of that ever became part of the mainstream media narrative. It was, oh yeah, they did it for the 72 virgins.
Well, that's not clickbait.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
It's the same here. It's like there's so many families that are pushed into like crime because they're not making enough money to even just feed their family. So it's like, yeah, of course I'm not condoning any type of crime, but it's like, what the fuck do you expect people to do when our housing is through the roof? Like, I'm a teacher. I'm a veteran teacher.
Yeah.
And if my roommate moved out, I'd have to really move some shit around to figure it out.
Of course.
It's like, what are you expecting people to do?
And it's like not like they're doing that to like get Corvettes and like fancy cars. It's like they're trying to get their basic needs met.
They're trying to get diapers for the baby.
Yeah.
They're trying to get baby formula to feed their child.
It's insane. And the media definitely doesn't help any of it.
They sensationalize everything.
Of course. And the more sensational they can make it, the better, obviously, because they'll get more clicks. And so post 9/11, it was scary. I was a freshman in college. I'm aging myself right now, but I was a freshman in college.
What's really funny is so was I.
Same page. I was going to Delta College in Stockton. It was right before I left to go to Europe to study abroad, and I was living at home, and I walked down the stairs, and my dad's glued to the TV, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he was like, "The world just went to hell." And I'm like, what do you mean? And then it was the first plane had just hit. And it was on, so I watched the second plane hit. And he looked at me and he goes, don't say anything. This was probably done by some Muslims and they're going to blame us. And he was like, because he knows I can't bite my tongue. He was like, today you shut up.
Yeah.
He's like, today of all days, you don't say a word. Go to school, don't say shit.
Yeah.
So I went to school and I remember and I was taking a statistics class. And it was me and there was one other Arab in the class. And this was before, again, they had announced, this was the first class of the morning. So the news was still on. They hadn't even announced that Osama bin Laden or anybody had taken credit for it. And the teacher said, she goes, we're going to nuke those Arabs that did this.
What?
To the class. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What the fuck?
Is this teacher still teaching?
I have no idea. I haven't
What
given
class was this?
It was a statistics class in Delta College.
Hey, Stacey's
And
about to do a deep dive.
I'm like, oh, this bitch is going down. I'm about to cancel her ass.
I did file a complaint with the dean that went nowhere.
Of course it didn't.
But then afterwards, it was like, now we're traveling, we're going places,
Yeah.
and I was, especially at the time, I ended up moving to Europe and I studied abroad for about 5 years. During that time, I'm a single young Arab man who's tall and noticeable, traveling alone with not a lot of luggage. And so I was harassed and stopped everywhere I went. Everywhere I went. And I'm talking about like strip searches, interrogation rooms for hours. It just became a part of my world. I'm like, all right, well, let's go. Like I would prepare, hey, don't pick me up from the airport until after I land for like 3 or 4 hours until I get out of the interrogation room. Like that just became the norm. So quick story is the first time I ever flew to Poland. I went by myself. I didn't know anybody there. And I was just like, I want to go live abroad and go study. I was 19. Hopped on a plane, flew, landed in Frankfurt. Frankfurt took a small prop plane to Poland. There's a city called Katowice. Landed there, tiny little airport. I get off the plane and I go to customs. They check my passport and they're looking at it and they're looking at me like weird. And I was just like, and it was late. It was probably about 8 or 9 p.m. And the guy closes my passport and he just leaves a little kiosk that he's in and walks away and just leaves me standing there. And I was just like, okay, it's kind of weird. Comes back and he goes, follow me. He takes me into an interrogation room, sit me down. There's 2 armed guards literally like right here, holding their guns. And a guy comes in a nice, press suit, puts the passport down in front of me and he says, tell me where you're from. And I was like, it says it all. It's American. It's an American passport. I'm from America. And he goes, no. Where are you from? And I opened it. And I'm like, I'm born in San Francisco. It says your birthplace on here. Like, I was born in America. And he said, no. He goes, you're not what an American looks like.
What the?
He's like, you're not an American. Where are you from? And I was like, well, do you want to know where my parents are from? And I'm like, he goes, yeah. I said, both my parents were born in Jerusalem. They're Palestinian. And he goes, Palestina? And then the other guys are like gripping their guns. And I was like, oh shit, I don't know what I just said, but I might not make it out of this room.
Yeah.
That was probably terrifying.
So imagine the situation. You're scared, obviously. So you know what he tells me? He goes, why are you nervous? Like it was
I'm fucking 19 and there's 2 guards.
You're fucking gripping guns?
And like it's suspicious that I'm nervous, right? And I told him, I said, I have 2 guns pointed at my head. Wouldn't you be nervous? And he said, not if I didn't do anything wrong. And I said, okay. So he goes, I'll be back. He takes my passport. He walks out. 2 hours. I'm just sitting there. Both guards, not moving, standing over my head. No, they won't bring me anything. Like, I'm like, can I get a glass of water or something?
Yeah.
I've been on 20 hours of flights. Can I
Like,
just
can I get a 7-Up? Like, fuck.
something. Give me a vodka soda and a cigarette. Like something.
Period.
So he finally comes back and he goes, where are you from? And I'm like, what the fuck do you want me to say?
Same question?
I'm like, seriously, same question. And I'm like, what do you want me to say? I'm like, do you want me to say I'm from Israel? Would that make you happy? And he goes, yes. And I'm like, cool, I'm from Israel. What do you want to know? And he literally physically threw my passport at my chest. And he goes, you can get out of here.
What the?
No reason. Just want to fuck with me. I get out. My bags are the only bags still on the turnstile. The airport's basically closed. There's no cabs. to get to the city. So I'm literally calling the hotel where I'm supposed to stay for the night before I go to my dorms, begging them to send a cab company out to get me. I can't speak the language. I just got there that day. It was horrendous. It took probably 8 hours total from the time I landed to the time I actually put my head down to sleep.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and it repeated itself wherever I went.
And how long was that after 9/11? Like how quick?
That was almost a year to the day. But in between, I took even on domestic flights. I took a flight from Sacramento to LA, and on the flight back, back in the day, and Stacey, you'll remember this because you're old like me. Even though Melissa's only a year younger, Southwest used to not have boarding groups. It used to be the first person to show up got the first selection of seat, right?
Yeah.
So I used to get to the airport hella early, and I would stand right next to the check-in counter so I could go in and get that I wanted the emergency exit seat or the first seat because you can't tell, but I'm incredibly tall.
Yeah, you look like a short king to me right now.
So I need all the legroom I can get. So I was on a flight, LA to Sacramento. This was maybe 2 months after 9/11. And I was at a wedding in LA, and I'm on the phone with one of my cousins, and I'm standing right next to the ticketing counter, and I'm talking to him in Arabic, and I got loud in Arabic. My mistake. And so it did not sound pleasing to the ear. What I was saying. Like, I'm sure they got freaked out. So I hang up, and they're ready to board, and I have my ID because all you needed was an ID to get on. Obviously still to this day. And the guy goes, "Oh, you've been randomly selected for a search." And I looked at him, and I said, "At least give me the dignity of looking at my name first."
Yeah.
Like, you didn't check my name against any list. And he's like, "No. I saw the way you were holding it, randomly selected. You gotta go this way." I said, "Okay." Take off to the side. There's a security guard. He has, or a TSA agent at the time. He has my carry-on. He opens it up and just starts pulling stuff out, just like in front of everybody on this table, just ripping stuff out of my bag.
All your dildos?
Melissa, are
and
you?
I was so worried. I was so worried about the glass ones because those.
I dead ass was gonna say the exact same joke, and she fucking snatched it out of the universe.
No, she knew what time it was because she's seen them.
She knows you.
She got the bead. He got the beads out. He was like, "What kind of necklace is this?" And I was like, "Well, don't smell it." So he's ripping, and I'm like, "Dude," "You got my dirty drawers out. This is not it's not good, And I'm like, "Are you gonna put this shit back?" And he goes, "No." And so I was like, "Okay." So then he has me take off my shoes, and then he says, "Unbuckle your belt, unbuckle your pants, and pull them down a little bit." And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And he was like, "No." And I said, "Take me to a room and do this. I'm not doing this in front of everybody."
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, you're doing it right here." And so I said, "Okay." And I took off my belt, and I unbuttoned my pants, and I dropped them to the floor.
Yeah.
And I said, "Is that what you wanted to see?" And I basically yelled, "Is that what you wanted to see?" And he goes, "Pull up your pants, or I'm going to arrest you for indecent exposure."
What the?
And I was so fucking mad. And I was like, "Am I clear to go?" And he goes, "Yeah." I pulled up my pants, I grabbed my stuff, and I've never cursed as much in my life as I did walking onto that plane, begging them to throw me off.
Yeah.
I was like, "You guys are going to hate your lives for the next hour unless you throw me off this fucking plane."
Yeah.
And I cussed everybody out for an hour. And I landed. I remember I was so mad. I was like, "I'm going to call my dad. He's going to know what to do." I'm so fucking pissed. And I called him and I'm like, "Pop, you won't believe the shit they did to me." And he was like, "That's the world we live in nowadays." That was his answer. He's like, "Get used to it."
How do you just not stay mad like that? You genuinely walk around and you're like, it sounds like your family is full of joy and you know what I mean? How are you just not fucking pissed at everybody?
Because you have to let it go. The thing is, if I carried any of that anger with me, what kind of life would I live?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And again, that's something that we learned. Dude, when my family gets together, 20, 30 minutes in, we're fucking dancing and singing, and people are banging on shit to make drum sounds, and we're telling jokes. My dad is the king of one-line jokes, and he knows literally thousands of them, and they get raunchier as the night goes on.
I like your dad.
So there's some
I know, I love your dad.
Dude, make you blush jokes, fucked up, so he'll just start ripping them off, boom, 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 boom. and you can't even catch your breath because you're laughing so hard. And and this is my dad, who again went through the shit of the shit, and could have died 20 times before he turned 25. Saw shit that nobody should ever see. People killed in front of him, had to kill people, was tortured, was a POW, like everything that he went through. And there's nobody happier than this guy. So what right do I have to be mad?
Yeah. Fuck, is that the fucking is that the chemistry? Like, is that what we need to do?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you got to go through a ton of shit, and then you figure out there's nowhere to go but up. So why not be happy?
I mean, honestly, like I feel like some of the people that I've seen have the most struggle are the happiest, because it's like they just stay in a place of gratitude, right?
You have to
be to fucking be alive and have their families. If they're blessed enough to have their families, like they're happy, you know.
I lost my two best friends in the world within 3 weeks of each other. They were both murdered within 3 weeks of each other, and it was right around my 21st birthday. And I was angry for a long time, for way longer than I ever should have been. And when I finally let that anger go, is when I finally got to appreciate everything that I had with them beforehand. Yeah, and that's what keeps me happy. Because even to this day, like in February the end of February, it's March 1st basically, will be 20 years since my real like brother Omar passed away. He was murdered in a club in Poland by some skinheads that were part in Poland. He had come with me to med school, and he was stabbed in a fight that he was trying to break up by some neo-Nazis that were, skinheads, part of the neo-Nazi party out there. And he bled to death before we got him into an ambulance. And so I was holding him in my arms.
I was like, and you were there, like witnessing this.
I was 20. I was holding him. I was putting pressure over his wound. And I was 20 years old. And then we flew him back. We flew his body back to America to be buried out here. He's in the Lodi Cemetery, by the way. And at that funeral, my boy Ahmed, who was my other best friend, was there. We comforted each other. 2 weeks later, Ahmed was struck and killed by a drunk driver. 2 weeks later, not even we didn't even get a chance to breathe, and he was struck and killed on my 21st birthday.
This is all in the Lodi Stockton area?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is that where we didn't say that? Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in the Lodi Stockton area. Yes. Yeah. So I was born in San Rafael, when my dad used to work at Marin General Hospital. We lived in Petaluma for a little bit, and then we moved to Stockton when I was like 4 years old. When they opened up the St. Joe's Cancer Center, that's where he worked for like 36 years before he retired.
Damn.
Yeah. So I grew up. I know that obviously we grew up in that area. Again, the families there. This is crazy too. There's like 20, maybe 15 to 20 Arab families in the Stockton Lodi area. We've been here since the 80s, and we're straight up family. Like we all come from different backgrounds. We're all from different countries in the Middle East, but every one of those aunties are my mom. And I took all their daughters to prom because
I bet we know some of the same people.
Yeah, dude,
I guarantee we know some of the same people.
I'm sure we do. What high school did you go to?
Lodi High.
Okay, I went to Bear Creek. Oh, then you went to Tokay, obviously, Melissa. Lodi High. Do you know a guy? Do you remember a guy named Tamim Mardini?
Of course, I know. He's a judge now. Yeah, I know him very well.
That's my brother.
That is so I've known Tamim all through high school. He's actually used to be good friends with my brother, but he's I don't want to go like too far off on this because
that's fine. I love. But
I also know him and his wife used to be my customers when I used to manage a restaurant.
Deanna, his wife, and I have known each other since we were 2 years old. I took Deanna's little sister Hadil to her prom twice, 2 years in a row.
So you know Mona too. Mona was a great. I was in between Tamim and Mona.
That's insane.
We'll talk off the episode.
Tamim's coming to my house tomorrow.
I know.
So tell him I was on Stacey Reese's podcast.
1,000% I'm going to tell him. That's crazy. Anyway,
you're like, oh no, stay away from that bitch.
I love him.
That's what everybody says. Damn it.
I know.
So my question is, so we talked about the travel. I want to hear like even more, because I feel like this doesn't really get talked about, is like when you would go get medical care, when you at work, like how did this impact you post 9/11 with all of that?
So it was especially at the time I was at Delta, is before I left to Europe. And at the time, I remember there was a small group of us Muslim guys, maybe like 15 of us from all different backgrounds. And we were like pariahs walking around. That's what it felt like. We really felt like pariahs. Like second looks, I got followed around in the mall at Weberstown Mall. Security guard followed me around. I'm like, what am I gonna do to Weberstown?
Like, bro, me of all people?
Yeah, like I'm gonna really. I'm gonna think I'm gonna do something to Dillard's. Like,
You know how many people are stealing from Dillard's right now? Like,
exactly.
Go get them.
Like it's not that serious. I remember. I don't know if you guys remember on March Lane. There was a coffee shop called Java Aroma.
yeah.
I used to go there all the time. We used to take our hookahs out, and we would.
Was that the one that was in Quail Lakes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, March Lane and Quail Lakes. So Java, we all the Arabs, because it was owned by an Arab. We go out there, we put our hookahs outside right by because they had a little man-made river, and we would smoke hookah and drink coffee.
You know what's so funny is I totally remember that because it was close to, what was that bar, Basil's?
Yes, it was right across the street from Basil's.
Right across the street from there, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So we used to sit out there just for hours, just hitting the hookah, drinking coffee, chilling, just having a good time. All like 15, 20 Arab guys. And I remember a cop came one time, and we were again drinking coffee out of coffee cups, and was like, "We got reports of you guys being drunk in public." And we're like, "What the fuck? Like what?"
You're like, maybe high in public.
Yeah, right. And so he was like, "Let me," and he sit there and opened up every one of our coffee cups, poured some out, smelled it to make sure we didn't have alcohol inside. He had us open up the hookahs to make sure there wasn't any marijuana. I'm like, dude, we're not dumb enough to smoke weed in these in public. Like we do this at the house. We don't do it. So, anyways, and then out of nowhere, again, this was probably like December of 2001. He goes, "What'd you guys think of 9/11?"
What the fuck?
Like, what are we gonna say? So I was like,
I thought it was great, actually.
Yeah, I was like, is there gonna be a 12?
Everything went according to plan, officer. Like, what the fuck? You think
everybody loves a sequel. Like, when is it happening again? So I answered, and I was like, it was a tragedy, obviously. Like, it's just terrible. Anytime anybody loses their life, it's a tragedy. Done. And he says, he's like, yeah, we're gonna get you guys.
What the?
This is a police officer, Stockton PD. It's not like
you guys are kids.
Not surprising
this time, right?
We're children. We're literally 18 years old. But some of the kids were 16, 15, and they're just sitting there harassing us. But they're just sitting there. But that was what we went through. That's what we went through. So it was a lot of that. Like, you believe in this? Oh, are you going to have 4 wives? Oh, like all these stories came out about Muslims at the time, and all these things went rampant. And of course, unfortunately, the Sikhs got roped into us because they wear turbans, even though they are not Muslim. They're a completely different religion, different race. And they were persecuted like crazy. I remember somebody drove the Sikh temple in Lodi is one of the oldest temples in North America. It's like 130 years old, and somebody drove a pickup truck through it and tried to smash the place up.
Because that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it happened like right after 9/11.
Yeah, I don't remember. I lived in Santa Barbara.
They thought they were Muslims, and a couple of Sikh guys in New York got murdered because they were wearing turbans. Like, and this is the problem. It's like xenophobia comes with ignorance, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's such profound ignorance that you don't even targeting the right race. You're not targeting, and again, Muslims are 1.4 billion people on this earth. They are Asian, they are South African, they are South American, they are European, they are as dark as me, and as dark as any African American, and as white as a European blonde-eyed blue hair person. There is no race for Muslims.
Yeah.
But they targeted people that they thought looked different, and that's the problem. That's the problem. Like, people didn't really know they didn't know what I was. We get a lot of, are you Hispanic, but you're too tall? Are you mixed with something?
But you're too tall.
Literally.
Too tall to be Hispanic.
I was way too tall to be Hispanic. But that was,
dead.
I mean, I'm not lying. But but the problem is that it was this feeling that we have to hate somebody. Mm-hmm. We have to be upset with somebody, and you're the target. And that's what constantly happened. And it was unfortunate. I'm almost 1,000% sure to this day that our phones were bugged because of my dad's past, our political connections. Whenever we would make an outgoing phone call, it wouldn't ring right away. We would hear a click, and then it would start ringing. I'm not even. I wish I were making this up. It's not some conspiracy theory thing.
It's fucking weird.
And we would hear after we said goodbye to somebody, I would hear a click before I heard a dial tone. And so I know people were listening. I know there was a file. Like there had to have been. There had to have been. Like we were. Part of the thing is, and this is another quick tangent. My dad had been investigated by the FBI in the 70s, but it wasn't because of anything he did. He, when my dad first came to America, after he worked at the grocery store for a little bit, he learned English and then became a security guard at the San Francisco Chronicle. And he would work the night shift from midnight to 8 a.m. and then go to school from 8 to like 3 and then go home and sleep for a couple hours and do it all again. So as a security guard, one night somebody came up to him and handed him a package and said, "This is for the editor." And my dad didn't know any better. Took it up to the editor's office, left it at his door. It ended up being a bomb. And it went off. Luckily, nobody died. But all witnesses said that they handed it to my dad and my dad dropped it off. So the FBI questioned him. It turned out he had nothing to do with it. It was the same people that kidnapped Patty Hearst, the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army, who my dad was there when Patty Hearst was kidnapped as well.
You've been seeing some shit on.
I know.
I call him Forrest Gump because he was part of every. He was like a little bit of every part of history. Like he's like the butterfly effect. He was there. He was in Golden Gate Park. I'm pretty sure it was Golden Gate Park when Squeaky Fromm. I think it was Squeaky Fromm, one of Charles Manson's people, shot at Gerald Ford, and the bullet went right past his ear. Like she almost assassinated Gerald Ford.
Listen, I'm not that old, okay?
Okay, no, but again,
I'm just kidding.
He was there for that. And I'm like, dude, you affected, like, did you bump into somebody that made her gun miss?
Yeah, what happened? Like, no.
I'm telling you, he's 100% Forrest Gump. So anyways, so he's already been investigated. So I knew I'm like, there's a file on this guy.
Yeah.
And now we're getting listened to. And everywhere we went, I knew there was shit on my passport that would red flag every single time. Because every single time I got stopped and searched. And fast forward, 15 years, my sister my little sister worked for the NSA, and also she worked for Homeland Security, and she was a presidential appointee by President Obama to work in the White House. But when she got top secret security clearance. But with that, they do a background check on everybody in your immediate family. And so the FBI came to our house and they were talking to me, and they had stacks of pictures of my old passports, like all expired. And they were like, in 2002, you went to Spain, and then you went to Italy, and then you took the train to Paris. Why did you do it? I'm like, I don't even remember this trip.
I was a kid just abroad. Like, what the hell?
I just jumped on a train and went wherever. I didn't care where it was going. But they investigated the shit out of us. But ever since she got top security clearance, I feel like my airport trips have been a lot smoother.
Good. She unclicked whatever boxes clicked.
Yeah. She went in.
Yeah, she hooked it up. I cannot confirm or deny if she did, but
I was gonna say, you better say allegedly.
Exactly, allegedly.
So do you feel like in Europe it was like the xenophobia or racism was any different, or like what was the differences?
Way worse.
Better, worse?
Yeah.
Way worse.
I've heard that from multiple people.
By the way, to this day, it's way worse.
Damn.
Nothing's changed. Everybody and this is no hate, but all the cries for Ukraine and how much everybody loves it. Ukraine is the most racist country I've ever been to, ever. And when they were evacuating people, when Russia started attacking, they evacuated everybody that they could, except for all the black citizens in Ukraine.
Yes, that's a fact.
They did not allow them to leave. And I can tell you, I went to Ukraine once, and I will never ever go back for the rest of my life. I was put in a cell for 19 hours. 19 hours, no food, no water, 19 hours. The guy who was holding me was like, "I don't like this." He did this to me. He's like, "I don't like this." He didn't like my skin color. He was like, and he kept telling me, he's like, "No, I don't like this." And so they kept me held, me and two of my friends. One was Egyptian, one was Afghani. 19 hours interrogating the shit out of us. It was freezing cold. It was like minus 20 degrees. There was a sharp wind that was coming in from the cell where we were sitting. And we had one jacket between the three of us because we didn't think we were going to be on a train the whole time.
Yeah.
We think we were going to get pulled off. So we kept switching the coat between the three of us.
Oh my God.
And I swear to God, at one point, I started praying and I was looking out because I saw the sun start to come down. And I swear to God, peaceful thought was, this is the last sunset I'm ever going to see.
Oh my God.
We thought we were dead. I was like, I was like, I just wish I could have said goodbye to my parents.
Yeah.
I clearly was just, I made peace with it. I'm like, it was probably 15 hours in. I'm like, they're not letting us out. They're not giving us any water, not giving us any food. We're shivering to death. My hands had turned like almost purple. Like they were like a purplish blue. I actually have a video after they finally released us. They took a video of my hands because they were almost like basically frostbitten because we've been so cold in there. And the only way we got out is that we bribed the guards with bottles of vodka, and they let us out. I bought the guard like 6 bottles of vodka.
You're like, why didn't I think of that hours ago?
18 hours ago.
Hours ago. I was like, please let me out, and I was like, I'll buy you it. And I bought him a case of fucking vodka just to get me out of that place. But that's Europe. They're way, way worse. I've never seen racism like I did in Europe.
You think like in general, or is that just like Poland?
In general. Because to this day, soccer fans throw bananas on the field when black players are playing.
Yeah.
To this day.
I've seen that recently. Who was the player I'm thinking of? But I
think it was Mbappe in France.
Yeah.
They threw bananas. And even the players in France say, when we win, we're French. When we lose, we're African.
What the hell is wrong with people?
But this is Europe. This is Europe. People think Europe is just amazing. And it is. Believe me, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to on planet Earth. I love travel, the ease of travel out there. Especially when you're in the EU, you're going around with an ID. Like the borders are open. It's so easy. And you can travel through 4 countries in a day. Like it's not tough to get around. But the racism that we saw in general. I remember I went to Prague and I was talking to some girl at a bar. And when she found out I was from the Middle East, she was like, we were told that Middle Eastern guys come here and they kidnap the girls and they take them back to the Middle East. And she got up and walked away from them. That was what they were told. That's what we do. How do you, like, what are you supposed to do with that?
You could have just said I was ugly. You didn't have to be like that.
She would
said you weren't interested.
I was like, I'm Argentinian. I'm like, I'm South American.
Come back.
I'm from Chile. I'm from Chile.
But yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like the and again, so everybody has their place. We talk about racism in America, and it's bad. It's not as bad as the rest of the world. Europe is extremely xenophobic. You know what I think the places that is worse is the Middle East.
Really?
Because the Middle Eastern countries will hate on each other. I swear to God. Like my grandfather, God rest his soul, I loved him. I mean, again, there wasn't a more brilliant man I've ever met in my entire life. And he told me, he was like, I don't care who you marry. His son, my dad's older brother, was married to a Russian lady that he met when he went to med school in Moscow. His brother was married to a lady from Finland that he met while he was on a holiday once. And he's like, I don't care where, what race, what religion, I don't care. You never marry a woman from Syria. Never explain why. He's like, you never marry someone from Syria.
Super specific.
No reasons, just
specific as shit, but it doesn't make sense. Like, right? And then it's like, because you look down
got
on
a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, damn. He got his heart broken, is what I feel like happened.
That's what I'm thinking. But like in Jordan, they look down on Egyptians. Egyptians look down on Moroccans. Iraqis look down on Kuwaitis. Kuwaitis look down on Saudis. Saudis look down on everybody else. Like it's so stupid.
And I mean, it's the same within Mexican culture. Like I'm mixed. That's already a deficit. If I have friends that are full, but they don't speak Spanish, the Spanish speaking Mexicans look down on them. I actually had a friend's husband tell me like, no, you're not Mexican. I'm actually Mexican. I was born in Mexico.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, but if that's what you're saying, like there's levels to this shit because then you're not an American at all, but you're here because I was born here. So it's like, why are we saying all this? It doesn't
matter. The race doesn't matter. It's your culture that matters. So whenever I've been going to the Middle East since I was 2 years old.
Yeah.
Spending summers out there. And that's why I speak the language so fluently as well, is because we spent so much time out there. I was shunned out there. They're like, oh, the American guy's back. Oh, he's from America. And
this fucking guy. Every time this fucking guy.
And then I come back to America and they're like, oh, this Arab. This fucking I'm like, well, I can't win.
Where can I be?
I can't be anywhere. So, and that's the thing. It's like, being a first generation Arab American has been tough because my parents were all about preserving the culture as much as possible while integrating the American side of things. So my dad is super like loves America, knows that the opportunities that he's given us wouldn't have existed anywhere else in the world but here, and appreciates that and make sure that we appreciate that. But at the same time, he's like, I never want you to lose where I came
Mm-hmm.
and never forget where I came from. So in my parents' house to this day, we don't speak English. We speak Arabic because he never wants me to forget the language and forget and pass it down to my children. He only speaks to my kids in Arabic,
Yeah.
and my kids respond. But both my sons can understand it at 3 and 1 years old, along with English because of them. Um, when I was living in Europe, there weren't really a ton of Arabs to talk to, so I would call my parents once a week. We talked for 2 hours, nothing but Arabic, just so I could keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to make sure that I would be able to preserve the language to pass it down to my future generation.
Yeah. And tradition and culture is such an important part, like you said. Like, it's not necessarily an important part of a race, but like for me, I'm mixed culture. So mixed race. So there's culture. I mean, my white family don't have that much culture, but it's like, there's it's even the difference in my family. Like my oldest brother and I, we grew up with our Mexican side, whereas my younger siblings didn't. And there's a lot of stuff that they never grew up around, but we did. So it's like they were exposed through us in a sense.
Yeah, it's true. And I can say the same for my wife because she is first generation Arab American as well. Mm-hmm. Her dad's Palestinian, her mom's Lebanese, but her dad came to America in his like early 30s, in the 70s, and her mom was basically raised out here from 18 on. So they didn't make it such a priority for them to learn Arabic as well. So my wife speaks and understands Arabic, but not to the level like where me and my sisters are. And even my father-in-law has lamented the fact that he didn't really push that on.
Yeah.
Because he wishes he had now.
Yeah.
But it's what you have to do. And that's why I'm so adamant about only speaking Arabic in front of my kids, because that's what my parents were like, you'll learn English at school.
I love that you do that too, because I've said multiple times on here, there's 6 kids in my dad's family. Only him and 2 of my aunts, the oldest 3, spoke Spanish. And he didn't teach us because he was always fearful. I mean, in Lodi in the 70s, my dad was 15, my mom was 14 when they got together. Had my brother at 17 and 18. And my mom always I hated when he would speak Spanish to me when I was like younger, meaning like 5, 6, 7. I'd be like, stop, like speak to me in English. I don't know what you're saying. He'd like sing to me in Spanish, which now I would die to know, but at the time it's like I always ask my mom, like, why didn't he teach us Spanish? Like, he was one of the only 3 siblings that actually spoke. And she said, you don't understand what it was like to grow up in the 70s. And my dad was dark Mexican, little guy. You don't understand what it was like for me to walk around with your dad, period, in Lodi. Your grandparents were field workers. And then on top of it, if your dad would have taught you Spanish, you and Vince would have been running around speaking Spanish, looking, I look more Mexican than my brother, but she was like, it would have been a whole thing,
He could have gotten you some trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I already got enough shit for being Mexican, even going to Lodi High. It was, there wasn't a lot of mixed race kids. There wasn't a lot of anything but Mexican,
Exactly. I mean, I was the only Arab in my school up until high school, and then there were 2 others.
And you went to Stockton schools.
I know. I'm like, that's surprising.
Yeah. But I went to Lodi Unified Schools in Stockton. So they were like, we got a lot of.
Bear Creek was newer, I think, right? When you
Bear Creek, I mean, now you're aging me. Bear Creek was new. It was only 4 years old.
I'll say, I opened it up for you. Yeah, my aunt worked there. It was a newer school at that time.
Yeah, it was
back in the 90s.
Yes. Oh God, back in the 90s. But yeah, no. But that's the thing. Like, it wasn't. We wanted, and again, I wanted to hold on to my heritage. I hated it as a kid. I used to get so embarrassed when my parents would speak Arabic in front of my friends. When my mom would pack me a lunch of like Arabic food, and my friends would be like, "Ew, what's that?" And I'm like, "You don't understand. In about 15 years, if I'd known at the time, you guys are going to be paying $10 for a can of hummus and some falafel." Like now, but this is the most delicious shit you'll ever have. And now,
hey, there's this little thing called Trader Joe's where you're going to be overpaying for shit.
Exactly. You're going to get some pita bread for $8. I'm like, nah, like we make that at home. So, but that's the thing. It's like I shunned it. But then again, I would spend all the summers in the Middle East, and I would come back just like super ingrained in the Middle Eastern lifestyle and culture, and then have to turn that off for the school year until I went back again. So it was
You're
always
code switching. You had a code switch.
I had to, and it was tough because I always had to try to find that balance. Like, who do I want to be today? Do I want to be? And now I've embraced obviously the Middle Eastern side. I love it to death. It's I play. I'm very old school, and I play like 50, 60-year-old songs for my kids. That even my in-laws don't even know these. I'm like, dude, my dad and my grandfather used to sing these songs.
Girl, let me put you on. Let me put
Let me
you
put you
on.
on to something. And even like we have a family song that's played at every single wedding, every single family wedding. The song is played at least 2 or 3 times. It's from the late 1800s, and it's been played in our family at weddings for like 130 years, 140
Yeah.
years.
Let's hear it.
And I'll play it for you one day. I'll play for you some.
Like, sing it, sing it.
There's been like, yeah, I'll translate it. The translation is really fucked up. So it's about, it's like, well, no, it's a terrible story. So the translation is at the time the Ottoman Empire ruled the Middle East, right, out of Turkey, and they ruled the Middle East for like 1100 years. It was a really shitty situation. Half of my family fought against the Ottoman Empire. The other half were soldiers in the Ottoman army. So I have a picture of one of my great uncles in the full Ottoman, and we're fighting in World War One. And then I have another picture of another great uncle who fought against him, and they're brothers.
Damn.
So, oh yeah, it's crazy.
Thanksgiving was awkward as fuck, huh?
You know what I'm saying? So like if you think of when World War One happened, I don't know if you guys know about Lawrence of Arabia.
No, but I feel like you're giving me a lot of information.
I'm giving you a lot of history lessons.
And I'm gonna look up later.
So do it, because Lawrence of Arabia, it was a Oscar-winning best film in 1960 or something like that. Peter O'Toole played Lawrence. Lawrence was a British soldier that was sent to the Middle East to round up the Arabs and have them fight against the Ottomans in World War One, because the Ottomans were part of that, like the Axis. Mm-hmm. So they were sided with Germany and the Kaiser against Britain and France and everybody. So Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia, goes there. He organizes all the Arabs to revolt. And then with the promise that they'll become like kings and leaders of their own land when it's done, Britain will give them. It's like fucking Britain wasn't even here, and they believed him.
Yeah.
So like it was so stupid. They sold him a fake promise. They fought against the Ottoman Empire. They won, and there was an actor, an Oscar-winning actor back in the day. His name was Anthony Quinn. Was this famous Greek actor, and he played this guy named Adel Buteha, who was famous for killing 80 Ottoman soldiers with his sword. He hated the Ottomans with a passion. He is distantly related to me because he's from the Hortat tribe. Mm-hmm. So we have some relation. So the Ottomans, what they used to do is they used to come down from Turkey. They would kidnap women and take them back to Turkey as like brides. And so there's this thing. It's called the Hodejha. And it's if you've seen any of these like old period movies, you see like a camel or a horse, and there's this big thing that they're traveling. It's like what's the best way? Like a tent that they're sitting on top of, and they're sitting inside to block them from the sun. Yeah, that's called the Hodejha in Arabic. And the song, my family song, is called Tahti Hodejha, which means under the Hodejha. Okay, so the song is about this guy's walking his bride. She's in the thing, and he's walking the horse, and these Turkish soldiers come up and they pull out their swords to fight him, and he can't fight. He has no weapons, so he tries to fight him, and they take his bride and they kidnap her. And the whole thing is like, oh, woe is me, they took my love, and they went north, basically back to Turkey. And that's what the song's about.
That's so sad.
And
yeah,
it's horrible, but it's our family, and we sing. Everybody's holding hands and hugging and singing the song together. It's horrendous, but I love the song. My son, who's 3 years old, hears the beat and goes, "That's our family song," because I play it for him so much.
No.
He's like, and he goes, "That's the song for our family," and he says, and he's like, I can I've taught him how to translate it. So he translates it into English for anybody.
Damn, wait till he's like 15. He's gonna be listening, like singing, and be like, "This is fucked up."
Yeah, I can't wait till like he really knows what the words mean, because it is a horrendous song. But that's what they used to do.
Damn.
Yeah.
So besides your current job, because we don't want to get into that and get anybody in trouble, what's been your experience work-wise?
Work-wise hasn't been so bad. So I ran a chain of urgent care centers for a little over 10 years before I joined my current work. And the owner of the urgent cares was from Afghanistan.
Mhm.
So we met through a mutual friend, and that's how I got the job in the first place. But when we would do like outings and stuff, because I started there, it was like 2009, 2010, after I had done my traveling and schooling and all that. Whenever we would do like mixers and social events and everything, there was a lot of, oh, like, oh, you guys are from the Middle East? Like it was more of like, oh, I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah.
It was more of like you don't seem like that. And I'm like, do we have a uniform? Do we have a
Flag
mark
on
on
the
our
back.
forehead?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do we have
It's like
something?
a secret handshake you expect me to do? Like,
Exactly. Like I don't understand what that means. I used to get a lot of, oh, you don't look like one of them. And I'm like, well, what does one of them look like?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? So in the
the fucking
medical,
audacity,
I
dude.
know.
oh, no, people have no shame.
Ignorance.
I lived in Atlanta when I did an internship out there, and bless their heart, it's just ignorance, and it was nothing malicious. I remember an old lady. She looked at my name tag, and she was like, "What kind of name is that?" And I said, "It's Middle Eastern." And she was like, "Where's that?" And I said, "That's the Middle
Middle
East.
East.
Fucking, it's the Arab countries." And she goes, "Oh, Arab, you're like the guy who sells cigarettes on the corner."
Oh,
And I was like, "I'm just like the guy who sells cigarettes on the corner." And she goes, "Why'd you come here?" And I said, "I was born here." And she goes, "Why'd your parents come here?" And I said, "Because they wanted freedom. They love, they bleed red, white, and blue. Like, what do you want? What do you want to hear? Like,
Yeah.
what's going to make you satisfied with my answer?" And she was like, "That's good. That's good. That's what we have out here. You guys don't have that out there." And just ignorance.
Yeah.
You'll never understand the way I blew someone's mind when I explained to them that Jesus was not blonde hair and blue eyed.
Have you seen the TikToks about
Like, am I
that?
the first one telling you this?
There's been like a deep dive on TikTok with like people like Jesus was not a fucking white man. He was
I
not a
don't
surfer in
understand that
California.
it was bastardized over the years, but I can trace my lineage to Jerusalem like 1,300 years. So he
Wow.
looked more like me than anybody else. Right? Like
Yeah.
we got family in Jerusalem in 500 or 600 years after he died. So
You're like, yo, I actually did my whole family tree, and
yeah,
Jesus is like my 67th cousin. He doesn't look
exactly.
like you.
Like
He
we
looks
can
like
go
me.
back. We can go back. But he did. I mean, this is what he looked like. He looked
Yeah.
like a man from the Middle East, like slightly tan, curly hair. Like this is what
A
we.
short man? Oh no, you're tall. You said you're tall.
I'm tall for an Arab too, though. By the way, so don't get it twisted. I'm tall for all races. But that's the thing. Like he looked like me, and I blew these people's minds that they didn't. I'm like, where do you think Christianity started? Like, do you think it started in London? Like, it didn't. No, it
Did you
started.
read it all? Did you read the whole
You're doing the
Bible?
Lord's work out
I
here. I would have just
did.
walked away. Like, you want a pack of Newports or what?
Exactly. You want a Lucy? And I would tell them like I've been to the Church of the Sepulchre, which was built on the place where Jesus was laid after he was crucified. The slab where he was crucified is still there. Here's a picture of me next to it. Have you ever been there? I'm like, here's Bethlehem. Here's
Like,
the
no, you don't even know Jesus. He was in my top 8 on MySpace. Who the fuck do you?
top 10. I wouldn't go as far as top 8. But no, but that's the thing. It's just like it was more of an ignorance with no need. They had no need in their mind to get that knowledge because their ignorance was enough. And I think that's the part that kind of hurt the most is that even if I tried to explain, it didn't matter because it was just like, oh yeah, I got my opinions. I'm good. And that was everywhere in America. California is a little bit better,
Yeah.
but not much better.
Damn. That's
But
disappointing.
can I tell you how different it is, though? My dad constantly tells me that when he came to America in 1974. He said people could not have been nicer. He said they loved foreigners. In San Francisco, he's like, everybody would help me where I needed to go. They helped me pronounce things correctly. People helped teach me English. They helped me apply for school. He said, I've never met nicer people than the people in San Francisco in the 70s.
Yeah.
And his uncle came to San Francisco in 1949 as part of an exchange student program. And it was him and 10 Japanese guys in this program in San Francisco at San Francisco State University. And he still has his yearbook from that time. And he's like, everybody was so sweet. He goes, they weren't as nice to the Japanese because World War II had just ended.
Yeah.
But He goes, they were so, so nice to me. And that's just how it was. Back then, everybody was welcomed. Foreigners were welcomed with open arms because the people living here knew that they came here to make a better life for themselves.
Yeah.
And they were going to do everything possible to make that happen. And that included them working 10, 12-hour days. Like my dad's first cousin drove a taxi for 18 hours a day to save up enough money to buy a store where he could finally afford enough money to bring his family over from the Middle East that he hadn't seen in 3 years. My dad got engaged to my mom in 1978. The next time he saw her was 1980 on their wedding day. Yeah, he didn't see her for 2 years. It's just how you have, but you grind the whole time until you save up enough money to make it happen. My uncle, the one I was just talking about, bought a store where the previous 2 owners had been murdered. And the reason why he bought it, because he got it super cheap, because people kept getting killed there.
It's not funny, but it's kind of funny.
He made a shitload of money off that store. He's the only one who lived. So I'm being dead serious. And then we had another family member who came in the 60s and bought a ton of shit in San Francisco. And if he had stayed alive, he would have had a wonderful, wonderful life out here. But he was murdered in 1973 by, it was called the Zebra Killings. I don't know if you ever heard of them. It was the Black Panthers went around and were killing white people. And they confused my uncle for a white guy. And they tied him up in his store and they shot him in the back of the head. And they stole his watch.
Damn.
And they were caught, it took 6 months before they caught the 3 guys. They're still in jail. Those 3 guys are still alive, still in jail. And my dad and that uncle's son went to the trial, and they saw one of the guys wearing my uncle's watch. He had it on him. And so he lost his mind, went to, attack the guy. They ended up getting it off. He still wears that watch on his wrist every day. And he was 21 years old when his dad was murdered.
Jeez.
It was crazy. So, we tie it back to grief and all that. We've had so much heartache in the family. I always tell, my wife's a great example because she has a small, close-knit family. We have such a gigantic family that death happens every day. And I was having a conversation with Tess about this last week. And I said, in the month of August, I lost 6 members of my family. But it was just, it's life. It happens. There's nothing you can really do about it. And I always say the hardest I've ever laughed is at a funeral. I swear to God, remembering that person. And instead of crying that they were gone, celebrating their life.
Rejoicing.
Because we know tomorrow is not set for anybody.
Yeah.
So why not enjoy the time we have? I remember it was even at Omar's funeral, which really, I told you, it really did a number on me. We laughed about the good times at that funeral.
Yeah.
Because we had to. Because you can't get over grief unless you hit it head on. And you're not going to accept somebody passing unless you remember what life was about. I obviously can relive the day he died in my mind a million times, but I don't. I remember all the fun times we had. And we knew each other from the age of 3 until we were 20. I remember the 17 years of just joy I had with this guy, not the 2 hours it took him to pass away.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to think about. Both my grandfathers I was incredibly close to. They were, again, my heroes. I loved them more than anything on this earth. When both of them passed away, again, I could have cried my eyes out. And I was like, man, I remember when my grandfather used to take me to the corner store in Jordan. He would buy me some candy, tell me not to tell my mom. He would take me around. Like my other grandfather, who taught me how to read and write Arabic, because he was like, you got to learn, you got to know your culture, and told me all about his life and told me all these amazing stories about our family, like gave me a history of our family. That's what I remember them for, not the moment that they died. And that's how we get through grief. Because same with my dad. My dad will tell you all about his war stories. He loves talking about them. He's one of the very few Army guys I know that will, oh yeah, dude, we got hit with this RPG. This guy next to me got his head blown off. It was crazy. I pushed him aside. I sat down. We were going. People would be traumatized. And I constantly ask him if he's ever had PTSD. And he laughs and he goes, my life is PTSD. He's like, the hell was a couple of years of war going to do any different? So that's it. If that's his mindset, who am I?
Normalized.
Who am I? Yeah, it's normalized, but you have to. Life is normalized. Everybody has some type of trauma that affects them. You can't let it get to you. I can recount 1,000 traumas to you guys. I've recounted a few of them.
Yeah.
That's not even a fraction of the things I've seen in my life. Does it affect me? Yes, it affects the fact that I appreciate and love every day that I'm here on this earth, and I love my family and I love my friends more than anything on the planet, and I do whatever I can for them because tomorrow's not promised, and that's the effect it's having.
Yeah.
It makes you appreciate things rather than like have anxiety about them.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
you're the best.
I saw the times. I was trying to wrap up.
That was a good way to tie a bow on it.
No, that was a good way to tie a bow on
it.
Yeah. That was
No,
a good way to
I think it is just amazing, and it's just another example of how we all just like deal with different. I mean, there's got to be traumas going down from generation to generation to generation in your family, and so just for you guys to be able to work through that together and hold each other and save space for all of that, and still choose to focus on what's right in front of you rather than like walking around angry and pissed off at the world.
Because the only person you're hurting when you do that is yourself.
Yeah.
So and you're depriving the rest of the world of you as a person. And why would you do that to yourself? And it was the same thing again with my dad having all the things he's seen, my mom having all the things that she's seen in her life, are the two most generous people on earth, would both take the shirts off their back for anybody. So who am I not to do the same?
Yep.
Yeah.
When they've done all that and gone through it and then overcame and persevered, I've had life handed to me on a silver platter in comparison to anything they've gone through. Yeah. So why wouldn't I be just as grateful? Why wouldn't I be just as helpful? Why wouldn't I want to give back just as much? It would be silly and be condescending of me and hypocritical of me not to do the same.
Yeah, stay in a place of gratitude.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's you. I'm sure your parents are proud of you too, because you are one of the most gracious people that I know. Like you're so willing to not only give like monetary stuff, but like just you give yourself to people, and you're just so generous and compassionate. So
it's the least I can do for just to give, just to be thankful for being on this earth. Yeah. I'm thankful every day. I wake up and no matter how tired I am, my kids kept me up all night. I go and I'm like, I just look at them and I'm like, this is what it's all about. No matter how hard you work, how long you work, there's something you're doing it for. And as long as you have that in your mind, you're never going to feel ungrateful for what the world's given you. Because again, people, I can't stress enough how I have it so damn good. Like, and it's not even a brag. It's just that I can't compare anybody's trauma. I know people have gone through 1,000. People are still every day go through 1,000 times worse than anything even my parents have gone through. Mm-hmm. And they're still smiling and happy and grateful. Like I've gone back. I took my wife back to Palestine. We went to my dad's city, and like just sad to see the state of some of the way people were living. And they were coming out greeting me, hugging me, because they knew who I was based on my parents. And just that feeling is so amazing. And I'm like, look how happy they are. And like, you can't leave without having a meal with us. We're gonna make you dinner. And like the Bedouins which by the way, because we're Bedouin, quick side story, Bedouins are known as the most generous people out of the whole Arab community. The thing with Bedouins is they give you everything that they have. If you walk into a Bedouin like camp, you have to stay for 2 days, and they feed and they clothe you for 2 days. And that was 2,000 years ago to today. Yeah. So I remember as a kid, we went, my mom and my older sister and I, it was like 1991, we went to a Bedouin camp where one of our family friends lives. And we went there and the Bedouins were like, come in. We're sitting on the floor. They're making us coffee, tea, other stuff. They're like, we got this sheep. We're gonna butcher the sheep right now for you guys, cook it up for you guys. Nobody's going anywhere. You guys are staying here. And but that's the generosity that they have, and they have nothing, and they give you everything. So again, my time can't be that valuable that I can't give it to somebody for 10 minutes or whatever I have to do, or go out of my way to do something for someone. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to be generous with yourself. Yeah. Because what are we doing on this earth if we're not going to help each other? What's the point of us being here?
Sure.
Exactly. Well, we are absolutely grateful for you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm grateful for you. Appreciate it.
This
Thank
was
you.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I told you this was going to be a two-parter, so we'll schedule the next one.
Yeah, we got to hear more stories. We're gonna have to have you
Sure.
back on.
Oh, I haven't even scratched the surface.
I know.
But
I can only imagine. You would have made a like really great history teacher. So if this medical director thing doesn't work out, go back teach
it's
at
it's
a
it's so funny you
university.
say that. I can't sleep at night unless I read something. I have to learn something every night. So I can't fall asleep until I read, and the most of the things I read about are history based.
Damn, bro.
And so I love it. My wife gets so annoyed with me because she's like, I can see your phone on, or I have a book in my hand with a little light on top. Like I'm like that dorky. But I have to read something and learn it because it just it makes like it, increases the neurons and the synapses in your brain, and
Yeah.
it keeps your mind fresh. You can't just think about one thing all the time. You have to open your horizons.
Yep.
So.
Tell that to everybody in my family. Just kidding.
All right. Well, enjoy
Cool.
the rest of your night. Thank you so much.
course,
Appreciate
I
you.
Thank you, Maui. It was nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. I'll tell Steve you said hi tomorrow.
Yeah, tell him I said hi.
Yes, life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess.